Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of The Kevin Moore Show, which is sponsored by my website, channeling.com. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Dr. Mark Borg. Now Mark is a licensed clinical psychologist who has been in a private practice in New York City since 1998. Now, Dr. Borg attended graduate school at California School of Professional Psychology, where he earned both his master's degree and his PhD in dual-track program in clinical and community psychology. Now, Dr. Borg joins me today from his New York office to discuss his latest book, Don't Be a Dick, Change Yourself, Change Your World. Now, obviously, we're going to mention the word dick quite a bit in this interview, probably, because that word to me is just another word for jerk. So, without further ado, Dr. Mark Borg, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you on. It really is. And an interesting book. Really, Don't Be a Dick. You know, it's a great title, and actually, there's a lot of meat on the bone, pardon the pun, for this as well. I'm going to get straight into it. I just want to know,
Right.
what it kind of inspired you to write this book as well when you did.
I live in New York City, right? I live in New York City, and I can tell you, walking to work this morning, not being a dick in New York City. I mean, you absolutely need to, check your dick at the door pretty much everywhere you go when you live here. But more personally, I've been working on another project with a couple of other writers over the last. We just celebrated our 9 years together, and I had what was an epic public meltdown at a work group meeting with these two guys, and it was almost like I saw myself floating up in the air, looking down at this horrible interaction I was having, thinking to myself, these guys are such dicks, that I essentially justified my own dickery and became like the world's biggest dick all in that one moment. And it really was like hitting a bottom for me. It was like hitting this horrible bottom in my own justified behavior. And I literally at that moment started working on this project. That was about 3 years ago.
Wow. Okay. And obviously you've been on a lot of other talk shows just now. The book is pretty new out in a sense still.
Yeah.
So what is your day job right now? Obviously, when you get off the interview with myself, what is your sort of day job?
All right. So my day job is I walk in this morning to an office here on Broadway and 26th Street, downtown Manhattan, and I put on my shrink cap, and I am a psychoanalyst. So I've been sitting in that chair back there, basically with the couch over here. People lie on the couch and get right to work. I also, in this office, see couples. So I'm both a psychoanalyst and a couples therapist.
Okay, that's really, really interesting, and we'll get into that as well as we sort of move along on this interview. A lot to talk about right now as well. So,
Yeah.
What is a dick all about, would you say, being a dick, in a sense? I mean, let's just get straight to it. And also, let's just get straight to the meat and bones of it. What is the most important message of this book as well?
Okay, the most important message of the book, ironically, especially when we're talking to what we think of as a dick, because dick usually is synonymous with words like narcissist, sociopath, asshole, douchebag, jerk off, but the message of the book, oddly, when you pick up this book and you say, oh my God, maybe I'm a dick, maybe I should read this book, there's a major bait and switch in this book, because the message of the book is be kind to yourself. The message of the book is accept yourself. The message of the book is put down your armor, put down your weapons of being a jerk and being mean to other people, because you're just inviting them to treat you poorly. And it is all a projection of all the things that you hate about yourself that you keep convincing yourself are in other people. Projection is this old psychological defense mechanism where the things that I can't stand in myself, I see in you. So I'm asking the reader to take a deep breath, to hit pause and really start addressing their own anxiety and insecurity and even sometimes self-hatred, and see how it's making their world a miserable place for them and everyone else.
Yeah, because I mean, another word you just used there obviously is jerk as well. But obviously, doing the work that you've been doing, and how many years have you been doing the work that you are right now?
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, I got into this field in 1989. I started doing volunteer work, and I then started working at a psychiatric hospital for adolescents. And then I loved it so much, I decided to get my PhD, and then I moved to New York in 1997. So, we're looking at 30 years and around this field of mental health, and so yeah, I've had a lot of experience working with people who start out right down on themselves, people who really have a lot of self-hatred, people who have some very, very bad behavior that they want me sometimes to just knock the jerk out of them, which might maybe be a lot easier than taking the reverse approach, which is first learning to care for ourselves, first learning to accept who we are, and then go out into the world with a very different head.
Well, obviously, you've seen a lot of single individuals, a lot of couples. I mean, what's your most sort of sought after people? Is it couples that are the sort of the most kind of people that come to see you for help?
Well, ever since I started a project with Dr. Grant Brenner and Danny Barry about 9 years ago. That project's called Irrelationship, and it's about the way that people sometimes are involved in what should be intimate relationships but don't feel that way. And so we started exploring the way that people defend themselves against the things that they think they want from relationship, like intimacy, empathy, vulnerability, and emotional investment. And because of these other they started attracting a lot more couples into my practice. But originally, I was very interested in working psychoanalytically with people that aren't traditionally treated with the psychoanalytic method, which are people who have pretty extreme psychiatric disorders, people who've been traumatized, people with dissociative disorder, and a lot of substance abuse.
Well, right. Okay. Well, there's a whole other book and conversation just in that, isn't there? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess marriages are one way of really seeing the jerks within, with the jerk within you sometimes, or seeing some of your inner issues. I mean, nothing but bigger than marriage will bring that out. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like this, and it's a funny, it's a funny perspective because, right, I mean, any of us who are in marriage know that we damn well better be checking that dick at the door. We're not going to survive.
No. Well, and they don't sometimes, do they? They don't.
They don't.
And I guess when you see a married couple, you'll know, whether, having so much experience. Oh no, this couple can work out. Or this couple, no, there's something else, that really needs to happen here for this to work out. And I know you would be very upfront with them when you see them and tell them that, as you don't need too much time with them probably to sort of diagnose them. But do you think all this comes from childhood? Sometimes being a jerk.
Well, being a psychoanalyst, that's really my perspective. I don't limit it to childhood. I really think that there are traumas that occur, in adulthood. I mean, again, maybe having a really bad marriage, maybe having a horrible betrayal, maybe having, terrible job or having a really awful boss can be things that trigger sort of an exacerbation of in your adult life. But I do think that back early on in childhood, we start to get a sense of security from our environment that usually starts out as our parents. So, yeah, I mean, I think that our parents and our early childhood environment and our developmental history set certain kinds of foundations for us that then allow us to be more comfortable in our own skin. I think the less comfortable we are in our own skin, the more likely we are to sort of knee-jerk react to the world as if it's doing. We have to protect ourselves against it, against sometimes the impulse to attack. Jerk is a person who's right there on the surface. They're very, very convinced that they're being attacked by other people in the world. But one of the main points I make in the book is if you're walking around like a jerk or a dick, you're not being attacked. You're not being attacked. You're being counterattacked.
Right. Well, absolutely. And you mentioned in the book as well that how being a jerk can be like a mood altering drug in a sense. You don't need to take any substance abuse. The abuse is within, in a sense.
Right, and you're so intoxicated with this sense of, kind of they did it to me. One of the main traps, I think, of the jerk is righteous indignation. And righteous indignation is this sense that I am out here trying to right the wrongs of the world, that all these people have mistreated me, and I'm going to make sure that never happens again. And so you're leading off with this righteousness that is actually an invitation for other people to either, one, protect themselves from you or me, or two, put you in your place.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you get a lot of people that come to you that are on all sorts of medications as well, which can alter the mood of the mental, mood of someone as well. And some of those drugs are legally given. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing that you're against sometimes. If someone's on sort of whatever kind of medication it may be, right? These can take away the personality on the front, and it can be very difficult for that couple in that moment, to who is the other person dealing with, in a sense, sometimes.
That's absolutely correct, and it's difficult. Some of the medications that people take when they have extreme psychiatric diagnoses or medications that they're probably going to have to take for the rest of their lives in order to stabilize. And I think one of the big problems that people get into is that the one thing that most of us want to be more than anything else is we want to be normal. We want other people to look at us like we're normal. We want other people to treat us like we're normal. And sometimes, taking kind of a severe medication or having too much therapy or having too much treatment or too much attention can sometimes make the person feel abnormal and so help. And so when the person resists getting help, it's a lot more likely that they're going to, it's a lot more likely that they're going to wind up, involved in what I think is probably the most dangerous state for any of us humans to get into. And that's a state of isolation.
Okay. But one of the questions I've got is, what about if other people are being a bit of a jerk or a dick to yourself, right? And, you're obviously coming from a different space. Being on that, trying to be the same energy back to someone else is not the way forward, is it? If someone's being a jerk to you, trying to be a jerk back sometimes, or trying to argue back, or whatever it is that you're trying to do back, it just doesn't work, does it? You've got to pacify some people.
Well, so there I am floating, right? There I am floating. I'm sort of transcending my own personal experience. I'm at a little restaurant called Neptune in the East Village. I've got these two colleagues, just so happen some neighbors are a couple of tables away, and I'm literally watching myself tell these guys, basically in extremely colorful language, I'm telling them to screw themselves. But I'm standing up at the table and I'm losing it. Here I am, like the neighborhood psychologist, the neighborhood couples therapist, the neighborhood, kind of bastion of society, losing it, right? So at that moment, I think what was going on, or I know what was going on because I've done so much exploration of it in the last 3 years, I had convinced myself that especially one of these two guys was the bad guy. I had convinced myself that that's where the toxicity was coming from. And so I gave myself permission to address that person's bad behavior. And in so doing, I became the dick. And so that's the real trick. I mean, and it's the same question I get asked over and over again. Well, what about all the other dicks out there? What do you do with all these dicks, all these sword fights that everybody's having all over the place, right? And I say, look, we can't control other people's behavior. So I have two rules for dealing with other people's bad behavior. 1, keep the focus on yourself. 2, refer to rule number 1, because there's nothing we can do for that person's bad behavior. But what we can do is we can take care of ourselves. We can hit pause. We can call moratorium. We can take a couple of steps back and not feed into it. Because it's guaranteed that if one person's walking around acting like a dick, that is an open invitation for all of us. And it's the most tempting and most justified, rationalized, reaction to a dick, but it always fails. Every single time we grab hold of that rationale for engaging that other person's bad behavior, we join them in the bad behavior. And this really is the hardest and the most easy to fail lesson for all of us.
Oh, absolutely as well. And, how do you self-identify if you are being a bit of a dick? I mean, how would you, some people just don't seem to have that ability, or do they choose not to want to see that because they're so into that energy they can't see anything else?
Well, I think that, again, a compassionate look at this means that we look underneath the behavior and we try to grab hold of what it is that's driving this bad behavior. And what I think is driving the bad behavior is what we call acting out behavior. And what an acting out behavior does, unlike those of us who easily use it like, oh, I acted out last week and I drank too much, or, oh, I acted out last week and I had sex with a stranger. I mean, those certainly can be, in layperson's terms, examples of acting out. But what acting out really means is that my emotion is so uncomfortable that I can't allow myself to experience it. So my behavior, it becomes the expression of emotion, so I don't have to acknowledge it. The behavior actually allows emotion to bypass awareness. So the problem with really bad dickish behavior is that the person who's acting like a dick is using it to basically get rid of intolerable emotion, and so they themselves don't really know what they're feeling. That's the problem. In order for anybody to really change, they have to be able to hit some kind of a bottom and say to themselves, this feels horrible. It feels horrible that I just lost my third wife. It feels horrible that I just got fired from my 10th job. And even then, even when you get fired from your job and you lose several marriages and you don't have very many friends, it's still hard to get a handle on the feeling because the behavior pushes the feeling away.
Yeah, and one thing you said earlier on in this conversation is, isolation that it causes. But
That's right.
You see some of these people that, well, look, it's okay not to have many friends. I mean, no one's judging that, right? But we're talking about isolation from any friends, isolation from family, doing as much as they can do when they meet the family to have conflicts, isolation from their partner, the conflicts with their partner all the time. Yeah, and as you just said, it's what's under the hood. That is a very good point. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And what's driving it? It's pushing other people away, and it's sustaining isolation. So I don't want to also miss the question you asked there, which is then how do you ever get a handle on it? And I think it's very similar to when other people say, we know that there are lots of people who have terrible drinking or drug use problems, and what they do eventually get a handle on it, and they hit what's called a bottom. Somehow, some way, there's this sliver of opportunity that they get to see themselves acting in this destructive way. And I think the same is true of dicks. I think dicks really have to hit some kind of that day in the East Village at that restaurant. I had a bottom when I found myself excusing really intolerable behavior toward these people who I really care about these people. I didn't want to push them away.
Well, I do hear on people that live in New York that if you one way to really, see if you can survive life is to live in New York. Do you know what I mean?
I couldn't agree more. But on the one hand, on the other hand, it's funny how kind and gentle and generous we actually are to each other more often than you'd ever imagine.
I love New York. I really do. My brother does as well. People that I know do. We do love New York. New York's a fantastic place, but it's kind of like, you can try to compare New York to California. Do you know what I mean? There's such different energies, aren't they? In a sense of the way people think.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the new age stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm from California. I'm from Newport Beach. So, and it's one town over from Laguna Beach, which has kind of a big artist center there. It's it's very mellow. I grew up surfing, the California coast, and I got offered this incredible opportunity to train at a psychoanalytic institute here in New York 23 years ago. I thought I'd be here for a year. I fell in love. I am one of those people who's crazy for New York.
Yeah, well, no, and I can understand that. I really can. There's a lot going on there, but and I suppose the people that you get into your office as well, you have to kind of say to them when you see the behavior that we're talking about right now, with the jerkish behavior, that you've got to see the good in yourself as well, haven't you? You've got to see the good qualities, and I guess maybe a jerk cannot do that sometimes.
That's exactly right. Kevin, you're absolutely on it. As we go through the book, what I really start guiding the reader through is exactly this inventory. I'm asking the reader to start taking inventory. And what I'm finding when it comes to dealing with jerks and dicks and assholes, all that, qualities in ourselves, it's not the bad behavior that's hard to see for a jerk usually. It's the good behavior. It's the qualities. It's the gifts. It's the assets. It's the talents. A lot of jerks, I think, when they have a hard time acknowledging all these wonderful qualities in themselves because maybe they've been exploited, or maybe they've been hurt, or maybe they're afraid that if they show their real self and then they get stomped, then it's really going to feel like a total annihilation.
Yeah, that's one of the main things there, isn't it? Is that they don't want to have any more pain inflicted on them from anyone else because they've probably gone through a lot of bad situations, which has just been, just because of their behavior, it's just enforced that jerkness. Do you know what I mean? In some respects.
Yeah.
And I guess you've got to feel some compassion, haven't you? When someone is acting like that towards you, you've got to say, I don't know what's going on in their life. They may be walking around with a lot of pain that I'm totally unaware of.
That's right. That's right. And it's really hard to see through the bad behavior, to see that pain, to see that fear, to see that loneliness, and to find a way to reach that person, to find a way to act consistently toward that person in a way that isn't confirming and reaffirming over and over again how horrible they are. See, I mean, the thing about even the word dick, it's like I get to it very quickly that I'm not talking about dick as something we are. I'm talking about dick as something we do. I'm not a dick. I engage in dickish behavior. And it's not just that the behavior is arbitrary. That behavior serves a purpose. And usually that purpose starts off with self-protection, not realizing that it really just keeps inviting the need to continually reinforce that protection. And the protection then becomes, it's kind of like the idea of the best defense is a good offense. So then the offense is happening over and over again. We know dicks. The people that we have in our lives who act like dicks, they look like they're on the attack. They are out there. They are causing a scene. They are causing a ruckus. They are, really causing difficulty in our lives. It's no joke.
Do you think some jerks and some dicks, right, can be manipulators when it comes to they want compassion from someone else and they manipulate what they're doing to get that sometimes?
I think that they do, but I do. I mean, I absolutely think that that's almost like one of the stereotypes of what we're talking about. But I also think that manipulation is still something learned in order to get something from other people that they don't believe other people are going to hand over without some kind of coercion. So I still feel like it's part of that package. It's part of that self-defense package. It's that part of that. Not only do I. It's not that I don't trust other people. It's not that I don't trust the world. It's that I do trust. I trust that other people are going to treat me badly. I trust that other people are going to withhold from me. So I trust that I have to come up with these devious ways to get them to give me what I want.
Well, you could swing that around and say, well, I fear losing having that behavior to be able to not get what I want. I want to get what I want, so I need this behavior, and it's always worked for me to do that, and it's the fear of losing being a jerk.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because again, we see that it can be a very effective mechanism for at least kind of wrangling what it is we think we want from the world. Hey, look, if the world's going to treat me this way anyways, then I'm just going to entitle myself to go out there and smash some heads or hearts.
Well, hearts a lot of times, isn't it? Yeah, especially those of people that are closest to you and family as well. We started this conversation of saying that marriage will really teach you it has me so far. Do you know what I mean? It really has. I've just got married.
Too.
Yeah, and it's really made me own a lot of my shit, right? I'll be honest with you, right? But
absolutely.
It really does teach you the compassion towards someone else who is going through a rough time. And
that's right.
And it's like, well, you can't change anyone. You have to accept them for who they are. So how do we accept a jerk being around us? How do we do that?
I think probably most of us don't. I think if it's a real jerk, sort of the real solidly entrenched in dickish behavior, I think probably most of us, who, unless we are perpetuating some kind of abuse cycle, which that happens, and I talked to that person in this book, but I think a lot of us aren't so much dealing with jerks, kind of dealing with jerks in ourselves, right? We're trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing that's inviting this other person's bad behavior, and I find that in marriage, like you said, it's an incredible opportunity to bomb things out, to fail, to have some kind of miserable mishap. That there's plenty of opportunities for that. But I think what marriage really is, or any good relationship, is also an opportunity to take each one of those missteps, each one of those failures, and then work together to fix it. Developmental psychology is telling us good relationships aren't based on us getting it right. They're not based on us getting it correct and reading each other and having a good relationship all the time. What good relationships, strong relationships, healthy relationships are based on couples who misstep, who fail to read each other, who miscommunicate, and then commit to working together to fix things. So I strongly encourage this for the dicks who are reading my book. I'm like, look, no problem. Every time you step off and you act like a dick, it's an opportunity for you to join with somebody and work to repair it.
Well, that's why, I say coming to see someone like yourself and seeing a psychologist in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been down the spiritual road for a long time, but I think sat in front of someone like yourself, like a trained, person, can be
Mm-hmm.
so helpful sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to reach out sometimes, don't you, for that help? Because
Sure.
some people would be. Did you find that patients that come see you, or clients, shall I say, that come see you, they're scared initially of having that sit down with you and kind of letting out what's really going on, or finding that safe space of yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I love that you asked that question because I find that every single person that comes to see me, the first step in adequate or excellent or whatever kind of treatment is the creation, the co-creation between the therapist and the client of exactly what you just said, that safe space. You have to create a safe space between individuals who are going to work together and who are going to care for each other in order to get to the depths of this really painful, scary stuff that people usually come into therapy to deal with. You have to create a sense of safety between client and therapist. First job.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And how long does it take someone who's on that road to recovery? They've come to see you, or maybe they've not come to see you. Maybe they're in some other country or in some other part of the states right now, watching this or listening back to this.
Yeah.
What's that first road to recovery? Do you think, or and how long does it take as well to sort of become that better person or become the better version of yourself that you're looking for in the first place?
I honestly think I think that the recovery starts immediately. I think it starts before you walk into a therapist's office or a 12-step meeting or somebody, who's a spiritual guide. I think that for me, the primary ingredient in all healing is the willingness to actually put yourself in the hands of a caring circumstance. It doesn't even have to be a professional. I mean, I think I've heard people talk all about sponsors who offer so much care and affection and love, spiritual guides, people from their religion, all kinds of ways that we are allowing other people to help us. And I think it all starts with the willingness to do so. So once that willingness, sort of cracks open the problem, then I think that it's not so much a matter of how much time it takes. It's more about how open you yourself want to be to what you're receiving in the process. I always say therapy is over when you, the client, no longer have a reason to be here. I think you can extend it as long as you want to. I think that getting at the presenting problem in the initial stages usually is something that happens within the first year.
Yeah, but then can a client maybe feel that, oh, I'm done. We're okay now. We don't need Mark anymore now. We're good. And the other person may be thinking, hang on, we've barely looked under the hood right now. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, certainly people do that. But I have a real revolving door policy myself because I believe healing happens in stages. I believe that healing is a process that once you crack that door open, once you start that willingness, you might find a lot of healing with your therapist. You might find a lot of healing that you take into your marriage or even to work. I feel like you can open up that healing. And what I tell people is stay here for this period. Let's deal with this problem. Let's make something concrete. Let's set a goal. And when you get to that, emphasis on that, and then just know that you are welcome to come back to this place anytime. I have people who've been coming in and out of my office now for the 23 years that I've been here. I mean, I'm really fortunate that I work in New York because New York has this sort of psychoanalytic mentality, which allows people to kind of come in and out of, the really intense phases of therapy. Maybe they'll come in for a year, maybe they'll come in for several years, maybe they won't come back for 5 years. I have people in my practice today that my first patient today was telling me, he's like, do you know that I started seeing you on September 11th, 2001 at 9:45 in the morning. He was in my office, this guy. He's from another country. He comes to New York where he's sitting in this therapist's office because his marriage is going through a real difficulty. And we both walked out of that office to a completely different world.
wow. God, I
Trauma
bet
that we
that.
shared together.
I bet. Oh, yeah. I mean, I always think to myself when I doing something about 9/11, which is very rare
Yeah.
right now. But where were
Yeah.
you on that day? Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You never
Yep.
forget
Yep.
that. Bloody hell, interesting. And so that's how. Yeah,
Yep.
that's wonderful. That that you can look back and look at some of the people that that you've helped heal and stuff, and that, like, as you're saying, they I guess things pop up for them sometimes that they thought they had maybe sorted out, but then it's still, there's still things that are there that they need help with, basically.
That's right. That's right. So this guy was dealing with marriage problems. He got through that. He came back sometime later when they were dealing with some issues of whether they were going to have a child or not in the marriage. And then he's come back more recently because he's just having some issues with professional development, and he's facing some challenges at work. So people come in and out of therapy sometimes to deal with different projects in their life. I mean, some people, honestly, I think sometimes people with very severe psychiatric issues will sometimes come to therapy and use it as a kind of a maintenance over a long period of time, and we care for those people too. Absolutely. I welcome people back after they go, and I don't ever kick them out, but I also don't grab them by the ankle. I don't grab them as they're leaving. I trust that we all have a wisdom within us that tells us, okay, I've done my time here. I'm going to take another shot at doing it out there on my own, knowing that I still have this person who loves me and cares about me, and I can come back into the to the fold if necessary.
Absolutely. And just remind us of your website as well, Mark.
My professional website is www.ccgny.org, because I also do some community work. You can find me on Psychology Today, and my publisher is Central Recovery Press. You can go to centralrecoverypress.com. I also have two blogs on Psychology Today. One is called Irrelationship, and the other one is called Relationship Sanity.
Okay, well, we'll be linking those below, and your website's been coming up on the screen, and obviously the book is linked below as well. Just a couple of more questions I've got as well, just before we end this. With looking at someone that's going through being a bit of a jerk or being a bit of a dick, right? What are they missing out on in potentials of what life they could have if they help to heal that part of them? How much more fulfilled could their life be? What could they be doing with their life that would be different in a sense if they were just coming from a different space towards themselves, not just towards others?
The most important part of being a dick is that you cut yourself off from your own experience. If dick is experienced as a psychological defense against being overwhelmed by anxiety, being overwhelmed by insecurity, then what happens when you cut off and you act out your feelings in really cutting yourself off from your experience, your emotional experience of yourself and your world. What happens if you let go of this behavior and you allow yourself to experience yourself and life? Your black and white world starts being filled in with color. You get to start experiencing yourself and other people emotionally, and you get to start forming and reforming the kind of emotional bonds that really are the most effective strategy to deal with loneliness. The dick is a lonely person. The dick is a lonely person. They look like they're just out there causing a ruckus, stomping around and making other people's lives difficult. Yes, they do that. But the dick has sentenced herself or himself to solitary confinement. This book is all about a liberation from that kind of self-confinement. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I live in New York City. I have people in their 80s who are on Tinder. They're dating. They're starting new creative projects. I mean, there are people that are so excited about their lives all the way through, all the way through.
Important. That's so important. Yeah. That, no matter what age you are, don't give up on yourself. That's what I'm trying to say as well. And you can rebuild those relationships within the families that have been destroyed by whoever. I mean, it's easy for even being a jerk sometimes, it still takes another person's and their reaction towards you in a sense, right? So, I always say it's kind of 50-50. It can be a little more one way. I'm sure it can be sometimes, right? But we've still got to, it's never too late, and I'm sure other people would want to, try to mend something there, right? Yeah, but you may be in a relationship where I bet you get couples where you can see more in one where they're healing themselves, but the other isn't. The other is still continuing that behavior, and sometimes you've got to know when to call it a day as well, haven't you? Which is a very difficult thing. Very difficult.
That's right. Well, Kevin, that goes back to what you asked me earlier about the one essential ingredient. The one essential ingredient for healing, in my opinion, is willingness. You have to be willing. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be able, but you have to be willing. And so the people that come into my office, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a willingness. I'm looking for the willingness of what looks like an intractable marriage situation. I'm looking for willingness. I'll take it from one person for a start, but I'm very honest with people. If there is no willingness to heal, then this is not going to work.
No, absolutely not. And I know I've already asked you this, but I'll go back to. I was going to ask you, well, what's an important thing we can leave the audience with? But I think just going to the sort of final part of your book as well. There's one chapter that's called "Both the Cause and the Cure," which is the last chapter. So I don't know if we can end it on that and see where that takes us.
Yeah. Well, the cause and the cure. I mean, the cause and the cure. Again, being a psychoanalyst for me is people. It's people. It's like the cause of our difficulties and the cure for our difficulties. Yes, I had difficult relationships. Yes, maybe my parents didn't do the greatest job. Yes, maybe I had rough times through my upbringing. And yes, I've learned that people need to be treated in certain ways, and so that justifies my dickish behavior. But when I've gone to the ultimate lengths of my dickery and I pushed everyone away, then people are also the cure. So let's let people help us. Let's let people love us into health.
Well, absolutely. No, this is kind of a sort of this is a different type of angle on this. But sometimes, do you think our kids, as they get to teenage years, they can be difficult, can't they? As well, right? That's one way of putting it, right? Can we be sometimes a bit of a joke towards our kids sometimes when we forget how we were their age at one time? Do you know what I mean? And it was difficult.
I love that question. In fact, I think it's my very, very final example is an example of myself with my daughter. She's now 12, and she's a difficult 12. She's a punk rock 12. She's a get a call from the teacher yesterday 12. She's tough. And it's exactly what you just said. It's exactly that. Oh my God! Like my daughter, I think one of the most painful things is that she calls me back to 12. My 12, my jumping out of the bus when I was on the way, my getting kicked out of school, my suspensions, my unhappiness, my hurt, my anger that my parents split up, and all these kinds of things. I think you're absolutely right. So the very, very last example I give in my book is a question that a father is asking himself about if I check my behavior, if I look at the ways in which my child is maybe even excusing my own bad behavior, I have to ask myself, what are those few from her childhood with? Is my child going to walk away from her childhood going, my dad was a big dick? Or is my child going to walk away from her childhood saying, my dad was loving, kind, and generous? Because those three words, loving, kind, are hard to get to if you're acting like a jerk. And I want my child to see me as a loving, kind, and generous father. This book, as I said, this book is a check yourself before you wreck yourself kind of book. It really is. And it starts with check yourself before you wreck yourself for me, its author.
Well, yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah, you must have got a lot from this. You must have done. It's almost like your own journey over the many years with your clients, and what's been some of the most important lessons that you've put into that book, rather than being a sort of self-help book. Yeah, you've done it in a different way, which is kind of cool, actually. And a lot of people will be able to relate to that. But there's a lot of pain in the world, isn't there? I mean, I know we want to be happy. We want to see the world as happy. But there are people walking around with a lot of issues, and
That's right.
we do have to try to put ourselves in another person's shoes. It is so difficult to do. And I think it's a constant reminder when we fall off the boat sometimes, which is fine, isn't it? Sometimes we get it wrong, don't we? We're not perfect.
Yep. But that's an opportunity, right? That's an opportunity when you get it wrong to work with the other person to repair. Yeah. Because you're on it. Like this empathy, Kevin, that empathy you're talking about, it's a huge high cost. But it opens us up.
Yes, it does. It does. And and if we could have a checklist every day that we go to bed on and say, well, what was a good thing I did today? What was one of the, maybe just to smile at someone, maybe just to be a listener, We're so used, aren't we, to saying, oh, how's your day? Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, how's my day? Oh, it's all right. But that's bullshit. Do you know what I mean? No one wants to say, oh, well, I'm suffering.
That's right.
Who wants to hear
That's
that?
Right.
But we should be try to be a bit more caring to ourselves, because what we see in another, we see in ourselves sometimes, don't we?
That's right. Right.
Yeah. So on that note, there's
Wow.
I appreciate you
Oh man,
coming on. I
that's
appreciate
good.
you
I mean,
coming
really getting there, Kevin. I mean,
Yeah.
really getting to that place of connection and,
Yeah.
and allowing ourselves to love other people and
I,
be
I
loved.
I would have loved to have done this interview in person, and
Yeah, me too.
maybe one day we can do, because it's such a different energy doing an interview in person rather than over video, because we've had a
Yeah.
few technical issues here, and it cuts the kind of, the energy off a little bit, don't it, or the flow off. But I just appreciate you bearing with us and for coming on, and I know we've had a short time, but we may pick this up in the not too distant future. So Mark Borg, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin, and really appreciate this time with you. It's been great.